Good evening. My name is Christine. I'm really glad you guys could all come out for the tour. Looks like we have a really big group, so I just ask that you stay together while we go through this museum. A little bit about my qualifications. I've personally known Emily Grecki for about a year. It doesn't sound like that much, but we've lived in really close proximity, so I've been able to study her a lot. And to understand the way in which Emily Grecki's writing spans across times, worlds, and human interaction of all kinds, we at the Notre Dame Natural History Museum have built a space just for her. It's really the largest Grecki collection in the entire United States, and once we receive a few recently purchased items, it will be the largest collection and display of Grecki in the world. So come back. Now if we're ready to move along, I'll kind of guide you through the space. So rather than find ourselves in the ocean life room or the mammal room, we are in the high-ceilinged and mysteriously lit and intriguing Emily Grecki wing. We are greeted, as you can clearly see, by tiny woolly mammoths frozen in their diorama. These itty-bitty mammoths in front of us are a Greckian metaphor, an image both cute and lonely. Beneath this display is a plaque commending Grecki for the way she writes, the way she conveys a place so succinctly and vividly that the reader can no more imagine themselves anywhere near their own reality. Emily Grecki is a curator of our hopes and fears and deeply terrifying yet very real sexual desires, and she interprets us just right. She creates dioramas that show us what we need to see. She's a damn fine storyteller and an amazing person. So says the plaque, of course. So moving toward the outer walls, where the dioramas are the most advanced kind, we see to our right a stone lion, an architectural moment that connects two worlds. If we look closely, one wears a red ribbon, and we understand the weakness of memory, the power of desire to move from one of Grecki's worlds to another, but the reluctance to move out of a Greckian landscape altogether. Next, to your left is a disfigured hand, a wound of great consequence, a wound that makes us cringe with anticipation. And finally, along the far end of the room, we see a man overcome with the tentacles of an octopus. The octopus is one of many spirit animals, clearly and obviously whispering into the man's ear. The spirit animal serves as that man's guide, and just like in Grecki's story, where we find that perhaps it is best to go about our experiences on our own terms, now I, your momentary guide, must leave you to experience the breadth and beauty of Grecki's work for yourself. I encourage you to start with the contemporary and performative exhibit that is dated November 13th, 2013. It's really quite incredible. So please welcome Emily Grecki. Does that sound okay? I'm going to read part of a story called Mass Hysteria. We were on the outs for a while after that. I'd go to the dark room when I knew she wouldn't be there, and she'd avoid me in the hallways. I remember that I was trying to think of how to apologize when I heard Lila Hirschman clacking her kitten heels down the hall, with tear after tear running down her cheeks like a consistent leak. At the time it was unconcerning, because a girl, in tears, in high school halls was not an unheard of phenomenon. I was especially used to ignoring tears at that point. But she was the first of 5 that day. Jackie, Dana, Missy, and Rachel were all found or seen crying around the school. This too probably would have been forgotten. 5 girls crying on the same day, even 5 girls crying on the same day with no reasonable explanation, just because, would have passed by without much wariness. But the next day there were others. Barb's, Parker, Samantha, and Nina, in addition to Jackie, Dana, Missy, Rachel, and Lila. The counseling office became suspicious that the girls' insistence on nothing being wrong, that there wasn't a reason, it was just happening, was as clear a cry for help as any they had ever seen, so they set about figuring it out. I heard it through the grapevine that they isolated the girls, that they played good counselor, bad counselor. Good counselor made them tea, set out pound cake, talked to them in a low melody about how this was a safe space where secrets could be shared. The girls just cried into the tea and filled their mouths with pound cake to stifle the sobs. Bad counselor turned on the 80-watt desk lamp, looked at their transcripts and sighed, told them how all this could affect their performance in class, how drastically their grades could slump.
how no college wants a crier. That counselor took out a picture of a afraid-looking girl in jean shorts and made them pass it around as she told the tale of this distant cousin who dropped out of high school and was now pumping gas on Route 9, popping Hostess snacks as a way of coping. There was a long silence before bad counselor demanded a response. Lila commented on the sandals in the photo. The straps are pretty cute. This was the consensus among the girls, and that was that. It wasn't until the third day that I even heard any of this gossip, because on the third day, the teachers began to notice the invasion in their classrooms. In second period, Miss Palmer was late and rushed right into detailing the checks and balances of the branches of government. I tried to pay attention, but nearly half of the students were quietly crying, and I couldn't stop turning around in my chair to count them, wondering if there was some big, tragic event that I had missed completely. When Miss Palmer finally found a spot to pause and look up, she reeled back at the sight of all the teary faces. Guys, it's just a quiz. In the front row, Farah let her face collapse into her hands. Miss Palmer frowned. I guess we can move it to Monday? Her announcement didn't stop anyone from crying, so Miss Palmer backed slowly towards the phone and called security. I wonder if it was the number of students that prompted her, or if it was the fact that it was no longer just the girls that were crying. Max was red-eyed and huffing like a dog that's been commanded to muffle his bark. Derek was wearing sunglasses, which was strictly verboten, and swiped every so often at the eyes underneath them. They weren't the only ones. I spent that day wandering around, wishing I had an ear trumpet, doing my best to snag snippets of conversation that would enlighten me as to what exactly was happening. I had a question about transcripts for the guidance office, and while I waited on a rickety blue plastic chair, I could hear some frantic conversing through the door. Have you checked the attendance lists? Yes, there are the usual various absences, but no one consistently out. I mean, no one is dead that we know of. Surely we would know. Should we send out a memo? Maybe someone has seen a student with an injury that we overlooked, or maybe something has happened to a member of the community? The traffic cop, or the custodian? Maybe a pop star died. Eventually one of them came out and told me to come back the next day. They really had their hands full just now. By the end of the week, I was convinced I had seen every kind of crying and crier there was. Certain ones I remember better than others. There's the pufferfish cry. The cheeks and eyes gloat like they're filling up with tears being produced too quickly to cry out. The mime cry, no tears, no sobs, no sound at all, but the face freezes in the expression of a tragedy mask made of clay, one that someone ran deep thumbs into, pulling down the mouth edges and deepening the hollows around the eyes. Finally, there's what I like to call the hummingbird heart cry. The crier sobs at a rate too fast for human ears. You can try to parse out the individual whimpers, but the ear can't grasp it. It just sounds like one continuous wail in a waterfall of tears. As the days passed and more criers accumulated, I noticed something else. Faces do not weather tears well. They sapped the students of moisture until their lips were chalky and cracked. Noses ran and skin was rubbed raw around the eyes. Their pores were clogged with salt. The crier that was a thing of beauty was a rare bird. I had seen only one in all of my observations, and that was Melissa. She didn't puff or redden or contort. The tears unfurled like ribbons from her eyes. I had never appreciated it until then. That first day I discovered what was happening, I ran to the darkroom to find Melissa, the true patient zero of this epidemic. She was sitting by the door as if waiting for me. I blurted out a hasty apology and she, yeah, it's fine, did, because we both wanted to get to gossiping about the criers. We propped our feet up on the extra bins stacked along the edge of the dark room wall. So, was this you? I asked her. Ha! She nudged one of the buckets with her feet. Not that I know of. You're their leader and you didn't even know it? The best leaders are the ignorant ones. Spoken like a true visionary. You know what's strange though, she said. I raised my eyebrows in question. I haven't cried since the day before this all started. I was surprised. She had cried every single day I had known her, and now it was over. She shrugged. It just stopped. It was the end of an era. After a few days, when I was done gawking, I tried to ignore the criers, but it wasn't easy. When they became the majority at the school, they started to turn their watery eyes on those few left who weren't crying. Their tears took on a haughtiness. We are in tune with the grief of the world. We are privy to the current of sadness. I tried to stay out of the hallways as much as possible. One day, when I was trying to find a place to hide, I stuck my head into the third-floor conference room, the door of which was slightly propped open because of the heat of the lingering summer. The room was filled with teachers. I paused to listen. Out of the murmurs, I could only catch the phrase mass hysteria before, "Hey!" shouted Mr. Carbonari. I froze. He narrowed his eyes, and I felt like he was as suspicious as the criers, like he wanted to ask what right I had to be so dry. We stared at each other. His mustache twitched. But all he said was move along and push the door closed. I continued on as if everything were normal. I turned back to my photographs. The only solution I had found for the plethora of photographs that no one seemed to want was to approach the administration about freeing up one of the bulletin boards for student photography. They immediately approved, maybe because they wanted to set an example of productivity for the criers, or they wanted to get me out of their hair as soon as possible. They set me up on the west end of the second floor. I was piercing pushpins through the corners of a grainy image of curved window bars, being meticulous in placement to make sure that the top edge was straight. I had considered bringing in a level, but ultimately decided that this might be over the top. I tried to make a mental one, imagining the bubble shifting in my mind, but it just reminded me of tears, and the thought of him made me nervous. Sweet picture. Spud appeared behind me, looking over my right shoulder. Spud was the name I had given him without his knowledge. Melissa and I had emerged from the darkroom on an idle Tuesday, squinting and blinking like newborn pups, when she jabbed my shoulder and pointed at the well-built creature in dark jeans. "What a spud," was what I heard her say. And I turned it over in my mind, thinking maybe she meant his tanned complexion, or perhaps the dimples that could be seen on his face were like those unexpected dips of the unreliable potato, the eyes that must be gouged out to become suitable. It tugged at some unexpected heartstrings to think of him this way, and I turned to Melissa to ask if that was what she had meant in her spur-of-the-moment evaluation. But when I saw her face, the eager cat leanness of her eyes, hungrily following the loping of his limbs, my brain corrected it for me. This was the first time he had spoken to me, and my belief is that it was because we were some of the only non-criers left at that point. I turned to him without changing my default expression, which I've been told is off-putting. Melissa once said it was like coming upon a cat in the dark. "Thanks," I replied. "It's part of the series." I pointed to the ones that had hung so far on the board. Got it. I felt that I would stare at him without realizing if I didn't have something else to occupy my attention, so I pulled the next photograph out of my folder. When I positioned it on the board, smoothing the yellow bulletin board paper behind it, he held the left corner so that I could pin the right one. "You're Lena's sister, right? Eh?" His fingers were shifting, letting the picture slide. I would have to redo this one after he had left. "Yes, that's right," I said, and it was as if a breeze of Lena came by and pulled back my shoulders so that my chest was thrust out that much further, as if to say that I was not without. I can't remember if we talked about anything else at the time. My next full memory of him involves us kissing in front of the deli by the bus stop. Whenever I would pull away to see if the bus was arriving, he would hook his fingers into my belt loops and ease me back. The heat of it, his laser focus on me, made me sure that this was some form of love. After that, we went around parading each other in front of the criers like show ponies. We puckered up constantly in the halls as if to say that sorrow was not the only emotion that could be put on display. Their tears around us made our encounters feel dramatic. We were embracing on the verge of disaster, our fateful love being lamented by a Greek chorus. Melissa would come break us up with an extended throat clearing and a rough shoulder shake if we were persistent. We had stopped hiding in the dark room. The three of us would march around the school and laugh loudly, our amusement feeling criminal. Our joy was a dictator ruling over those who chose to be wretched. I had done research on the phrase mass hysteria, and I wanted to cheer up the criers by letting them know that it takes a strong mind to combat such a thing, and that really, this wasn't so bad a case. They could have been plagued by fits and fever, body-doubling laughter, or a need to dance incessantly, so long and so passionately that they might have spun and kicked right into their graves. But I didn't say anything to the criers. Instead, I shared the information with Melissa and Spud. Once they heard the phrase mass hysteria, they couldn't stop repeating it, and we began to use it for everything. Pipe burst in the bathroom, mass hysteria. Pop quiz, mass hysteria. Wearing 2 sweaters indoors, mass hysteria. Or influenza. We thought it would be our legacy for the year. It didn't last long enough for that.